Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. As we continue with Part 10, The Charcoal Burners, from A History of Secret Societies by Arkon Daraul. Chapter 9, The Charcoal Burners. Among the secret societies of Italy, none was more comprehensive in its political objectives than that of the Carbonari. In the early 1820s, they were more than just a power in the land and boasted branches and sub-societies as far afield as Poland, France and Germany. The history of these charcoal burners, according to themselves, started in Scotland. A certain Queen Isabel of Scotland, they relate, was on the throne when King Francis of France first made contact with the happy democratic mystics who formed the original Carbonari. He had strayed across the frontiers of his kingdom and, since everyone is assumed to know that Scotland shares a frontier with France, it was a matter of only a short time before he ran into our heroes. Should it be claimed that there was no Queen Isabel of Scotland at the time of Francis I, it may be remembered that the first wife of Robert the Bruce was a lady of this name, and she was indeed to be found during the early part of the 14th century in rural exile in her homeland. The question of the land frontier between the two countries cannot be so easily explained, however. Now, continues our charcoal historian, there was a band of noble-minded people dwelling in this rugged land. They had escaped from the yoke of tyranny and took refuge in the woods. For the purpose of avoiding suspicion of ulterior motives, they took to charcoal burning, which is described as the industry par excellence of Scotland. Under the pretense of carrying their charcoal for sale, they introduced themselves into the villages, and bearing the name of real Carbonari, charcoal makers, they easily met their supporters and communicated their mutual plans. They made themselves known to each other by signs, touches and words. As there were no houses in the forest, they devised rectangular huts made from branches. They set up a government, which was a law-making body. This was a triumvirate. The members of it ruled for 3 years, and they presided over 3 vendite lodges. The first was legislative, the second administrative, and the third judicial. The last named was called the High Lodge, and Carbonari obeyed only their own laws. These lodges were subdivided into a number of smaller units, known as barracas. Each one started by a good cousin of some distinction among his fellows who was in contact with the High Lodge and was known as the Grand Master, Gran Maestro. In this forest also lived a mystic, a hermit known as Theobald. He became a member, supported them, and was given the rank of protector of the Carbonari. Thus, they continued carrying out their plans and meetings. It happened that Francis I, King of France, hunting on the frontiers of his kingdom next to Scotland, in following a wild beast, parted from his courtiers. Night came on, and he lost himself in the forest. He came upon one of the small lodges, barracas, and asked for shelter. It was granted, and the good cousins unanimously ministered to him all that he was in need of. Francis admired the happiness of these Carbonari and their mystic discipline. He thought that he saw something mysterious and singular in it, and revealed himself to them as the King of France. He earnestly asked to be told their secret and their objects. They told him, and he was full of admiration. He desired to be admitted to the order and promised to be their protector. He joined, and the following morning he returned to his courtiers. When he went back to France, he scrupulously fulfilled his undertaking, declaring himself protector of the Carbonari, and he increased their numbers. The order now spread through Germany, France and England. Known as forest masonry, Carbonarism practiced, in contravention of local custom and papal attitudes, complete freedom of religion, and from time to time formed powerful alliances with other secret societies, some of which may have in their turn influenced it. It became extremely popular in France, numbering in the first quarter of the 19th century numerous important French savants among its members. Under Louis XVIII and Charles X, over 12,000 Parisian Freemasons were also Carbonari. The principles of the organization are partly dealt with in the general doctrine of the order, extracted from the first chapter of the official, though secret, Statutes of Carbonarism. Article 1. Good cousinship is principally founded upon faith and virtue. Article 2. The place of meeting is called the baracca, the space surrounding it the forest or wood, the interior of the lodge is the vendita. Article 3. The members are called good cousins. They are divided into two classes, apprentices and masters. Article 4, tested virtue and purity of morals and not pagan uninitiated qualities render men worthy to belong. Article 5, 6 months must elapse before an apprentice can become a master. He must principally practice good works, help the unfortunate, show humility, have no hostility towards Carbonari, and enrich his heart with virtue. Article 6. It is forbidden to talk directly or indirectly against religion. Article 7. All conversation on religion in general or against good morals is forbidden. Article 8. Every good cousin Carbonaro is under an obligation to preserve inviolate the secrecy of the mysteries of the order. Article 9. No good cousin may communicate any decision of his vendita to those who belong to another one, much less to an uninitiated person. Article 10. Members are reminded that they must be most careful in talking with people whom they do not know well. They must be especially watchful in their own family circle. The objective of this society was to constitute a body of men who would be subject to the orders of a central body. When the organization was in powerful being, it could take what actions seemed necessary, probably of a political nature, against even established governments or military formations. From the earliest recorded period of its existence, it formed a state within a state. The regulations, the frequent meetings, the discussion of mystical matters, and the common practicing of certain rites produced a bond sufficient to weld the Carbonari into an association which came near to dominating Italy. A fair idea of the symbolism and the artificial shared experience which members underwent is available in the secret documents of the society. As in the case of most secret societies, the place where the meetings were held was specially arranged. The vendita, say the instructions, was represented by a room of planks covered with wood. The floor was brick, the interior furnished with backless seats. At the end, there was a block supported by 3 legs. On the 2 sides were 2 other blocks of similar size for the assistants. On the first block, that of the Grand Master, were the following symbolic objects: a linen cloth, water, salt, a cross, leaves, sticks, fire, earth, a crown of white thorns, a ladder, a ball of thread and 3 ribbons, 1 blue, 1 red and 1 black. There was also to be a radiant triangle with the initial letters of the password of the master degree in its middle. On the left was a triangle with the arms of the lodge painted upon it. On the right-hand side were 3 triangles, each with the initial letters of the sacred words of the first rank. These triangles were to be translucent. When apprentices were admitted, the symbolical picture of the vendita and the emblems on the patents, which are a repetition of it, were explained after a discourse on the natural liberty of man, its forfeiture by the perseverance of the wicked, and the necessity for recovering it by the efforts of the society. The initiated were addressed more openly as soon as they had shown an aptitude for seizing allegories or when they belonged to a more enlightened class of society. 2 written lectures have been found, one aiming at the less educated, the other at the intellectuals. The first is a short one in which the Grand Master explains that certain sages discovered that the way to gain the necessary ends of justice and welfare for the people was to found secret societies. The other explains the need for ceaseless effort for the society by allegories based upon forest examples. The trunk of the tree which you see expresses the surface of the earth on which the good cousins are dispersed. It denotes also the sky spread equally over all, and it shows us that our wants are equal and our interests the same. The roots of the tree mark its stability. Its green foliage and the strength by which it resists the storm show that it never grows old. As our first parents, after losing their innocence, covered their shame with leaves, the good cousins should conceal the faults of their fellow men, and particularly those of the society. The white linen in which you have been received is the product of a plant which has been transformed by labor. So we too should purify and cleanse ourselves by continual effort. As we were wrapped in linen when we were born, so we will be regenerated to virtue. Water cleansed us when we came from the womb. It teaches us here to purify ourselves from vice in order to enjoy the pleasures of virtue. Salt, which preserves things which deteriorate, warns us to keep our hearts from corruption. The crown of white thorns placed upon our heads reminds us to be cautious in movements and actions, to avoid the pain of being hurt. The cross foreshadows the labors, the persecutions, and the death which threaten those who would be virtuous. We should emulate our Grand Master Jesus Christ, who willingly suffered death to bring us nearer to salvation. The earth buries the body, thus should the secrets of our sacred order be buried in our hearts. It is the most important symbol of our association. The pagans, uninitiated, spread snares for us. They are perverse enough to mistrust our associations, the very instrument of their redemption and happiness. And were they to penetrate our secret, they might force us to sustain an unequal combat. The ladder shows that virtue can be attained only step by step. The bundles of sticks denote the members united in peace. The ribbons express faith, in the form of charcoal, which is black. Blue is the smoke and stands for hope. Red, which is the fire, is for charity. The specimen of wood, which is the badge of the apprentices, is to be fastened to their coats at the buttonhole by a tri-coloured ribbon. Several of similar shape are stuck in the ground at regular distances to mark the homes of good cousins. Its form is that of the pole of the furnace of the real charcoal burners. The ends are cut diagonally. The masters wear a badge of the same form in silver. The thread of that ball is the mysterious tie which unites us. The axe, the mattock and the shovel are the tools of our sacred labours. That the Carbonari were, and may still be for that matter, a body dedicated to revolt and to the gaining of material power may be guessed from this address to a new member. But the motives become even plainer when we see that in higher stages of initiation a different significance is given to the symbols which the member is asked to contemplate, and whose meaning he has to keep in his mind, conditioning him to aspirations whose physical achievements are explicitly and graphically given. The cross is to crucify the tyrant who persecutes us. The crown of thorns is to penetrate his head. The thread is the cord to lead him to the gallows. The ladder will help him to climb them. The leaves are nails to pierce his hands and feet. The pickaxe will bite into his breast and shed his impure blood. The axe will sever his head, just as is that of the wolf who disturbs our labours. The salt will preserve the head, a reminder of eternal infamy of tyrants. And the pole will display his head. The furnace will burn his body. The shovel will scatter his ashes to the wind. The baraka will prepare new tortures for the tyrant. The fountain will purify us from vile blood which we shall have shed. The linen will wipe away our stains, making us clean and pure. In spite of many Carbonari saying that there were but 2 degrees of initiation, it seems that there were in fact 3, or there may have been more. In any case, the objective of this select band of initiates is to find information about the signs and secret words used by men of various nations throughout the globe towards midday and midnight. The lodge where this ritual is carried out is made to represent a cave within a mountain. In one corner is an urn with the inscription, "Here lies the hero." The initiates believed that they could, by contemplation and throwing themselves into a trance, gain information about secret matters. It is here that the mystical and magical aspect of Carbonarism is briefly seen. It has been suggested that there was a whole range of higher degrees influenced by the cult of Mithra. Although various Carbonari secret papers claim that the society was founded on the basis of the ancient mysteries, including that of Mithra, there is much evidence to show that it owes at least something to the sinister and murderous associations which flourished in Italy for centuries before the charcoal burners were ever heard about. It has been said by some historians that the inspiration of the Carbonari and similar societies came from pre-Christian times, for there were settled in the Alps communities which seemed to owe allegiance to Gnostic and other ideas which some professed to see reflected in Freemasonry, Templarism and the discipleship of the way of the Sufis. Semi-political societies, purporting to avenge wrongs and to establish right in the land, have been known in South Italy since the 12th century. The Chronicles of Monte Cassino preserve a record of a cult which was in full cry in 1186, the Avengers. These Sicilians were chiefly distinguished by their nocturnal assassinations, and their Grand Master was eventually hanged. And knowledge of this sect seems to vanish at that point. Then there was the Beati Paoli, dedicated to destroying the power of arbitrary rulership. It carried on a campaign against courts, barons and prelates. Members made great use of the poisoned dagger, spread justice by burning out culprits, and thoroughly beat those who opposed them. It still existed in the 18th century when the trail becomes cold, though it is said that it still functions. Its activities are still remembered locally as those of a Robin Hood type of organization. It was from the Beati Paoli that the Carbonari seem to have adopted their ritual cursing of defecting members. Those who incurred their wrath had their names written in a black book, and this list was read out at every lodge meeting to the mass imprecations of the assembled members. A trace of magical ritual survives in their habit of burning enemies in effigy to the accompaniment of a death curse. Although nominally Christians, the Carbonari undoubtedly had rituals which recalled other forms of religion, and they were known by the authorities as a sect, and did not dispute the title. The ideas of generosity and kindness which are inculcated from the earliest moments of membership are not entirely idle ones, for it is on record that the ferocious Lazzaroni of Naples and the wildest brigands of the Calabrias and the Abruzzi have been known immediately on their initiation to perform the most striking acts of benevolence and justice. Carbonarism seems in practice to have known few social frontiers. An assassin, says a historian, condemned to the chain is permitted to take his place in the lodge of the castle of St. Elmo, where he is confined with other galley slaves, and the commander of the fort, himself a Carbonaro, has not dared to exclude him, but is obliged to sit by his side. But if there were discreditable facts about the Carbonari, it must be admitted that their secret papers also contained laws, which seem to show that a considerable measure of personal discipline was expected from members. Members habitually intimate with persons degraded in the eyes of the public shall be suspended for a year. Whoever gambles for wine, or frequents public houses, or appears often in public drunk, shall be suspended as above. Those who abandon their families or live a dissolute life, suspended for from 6 months to 2 years. Offenders against the honor of females belonging to good cousins were to be given up to general execration. It is noted that, as well as ordinary relatives, females devoted to the exclusive attachment of good cousins are included. It was realized that it might be the females themselves who put temptation in the way of good cousins. So, those who do not resist the criminal invitations of the wives of good cousins shall have their names inserted in the black book. Nobody was allowed to avail himself of the weakness of degraded females, nor could a married charcoal burner have an attachment. A special regulation, Article 74 of the Penal Statutes of the Carbonari, Section 10, Offences against Honour, provided for suspension up to 3 years for seducing or carrying off female servants of good cousins for base purpose. Article 71, however, shows that there was some scope for the more rascally of the good cousins, and this was when the objects of his activities belonged to the infidels. Those who shall seduce the female relations of respectable pagans shall be suspended from the society for a period of from 2 to 6 months. At the worst, then, females of pagans were only 1/6 as important as those appertaining to good cousins. When a constitutional government was established in Naples, the Carbonari came to the surface in such numbers that observers were astonished. In the capital, the patrols of Carbonari preserved good order, parading the streets night and day, headed by constables and agents of police, whom they have forced to become initiated in order to become worthy of the command. Their special uniform included a death's head badge on the cartridge case, since the Carbonari had their own tribunals and laws and were forbidden to resort to courts not under Carbonari jurisdiction. We hear that the magistrates, as well as the civil and military officers, have often been obliged to become members of the society in order to preserve some shadow of their authority. Something of the power of the organization recommended itself to priests as well. The lower clergy enrolled themselves of their own free will and seconded the views of their institution by every means in their power. The number of priests initiated, notwithstanding the severest prohibitions pronounced by the Holy See, writes a contemporary Italian author, is a proof that the Roman hierarchy, like all other ancient institutions, is in danger from its own members. A document on the increasing power of the charcoal burners, drawn up by General Coletta on July 6, 1820, says, "The number of Carbonari enrolled during the month of March in the present year amount to 642,000. The Carbonari were revolutionaries, and in 1820 and the following year they set Naples and Piedmont ablaze. They forced King Ferdinand to take an oath to their constitution and to wear their tricolour of red, white and blue. But if they wanted revolution, they did not want anarchy. And this is one reason why they ruled through priests, prelates, magistrates and others who had been duly sworn in. The revolution of the 1820s was put down through the help of the Austrians, and the society was driven out of Italy, at least driven very far underground. In France, their exiled leaders preached liberty, equality and fraternity, and gained many converts with important results. The Italian patriots Garibaldi, Mazzini and Cavour revived the secret society after 1830, and its members were again found to be ready for any sacrifice for republicanism and rule by the Carbonari. The effect which they had had upon the world was considerable, and it continued to be so. For 50 years they had fought in civil war. They spread to many other lands, including Germany, where they were responsible for the Totenbund, the Death League, which was dedicated to assassinating tyrants. They were secretly dedicated to the unification of Italy, and this they accomplished. But in the process, much blood was shed. Many were the injustices traceable to them. The Bolsheviks and their theoreticians of the communist persuasion are traced by many as offspring of the charcoal burners. And if this be so, then the force of the followers of the pious hermit of Scotland is still unspent. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.